Die hoofsweep van die ANC, Stone Sizani, glo dat oppositiepartye die howe nader om aandag te trek en dat die litigasie meestal media-foefies is. Dit nadat die DA besluit het om die parlement se aanvaarding van die verslag in die hof te toets. Sake uit die parlement boer inderdaad voor die hof. Of dit nou oor die blokkering van selfoonsyne gaan of die speaker se partydigheid, die gebruik van die veiligheidsmagte en natuurlik Nkandla self. Oorkant my is die ANC se parlementêre woordvoerder Moloto Mothapo. Welcome to Insig, Moloto.
Thank you.
Do you really blame the opposition? Let's talk about the DA in particular for running to the courts when they believe that legislation is being infringed.
Well, let's first and foremost stress that we respect and recognize the right of everyone, including the opposition parties, to approach the court as and when they believe that they've got some reason to do so. That's why we as the ANC fought for many years, for people to approach the court and to get some recourse in the judiciary. But we do believe that sometimes there tend to be an abuse of the judicial system to an extent that if you look at some of the cases that are before the courts, you will realize, you will come to a conclusion that they are done mainly for publicity, to attract the media. Nowadays, it's much more profitable in terms of the media coverage to address the media on the doorsteps of the police station as well as the courts than to do so in your own boardroom. So you look at the case that is before the Western Cape High Court of Ahang, where they are asking the courts to remove the speaker who has been democratically elected by the National Assembly in terms of the Constitution, just because they believe that for some reason she's not fair and she's just implementing the rules of the National Assembly that have been drafted by the members of Parliament themselves.
Because this is your quote to the Mail and Guardian last week. We know too well that courts and police stations, you refer to it now again, have become fashionable places for media theatrics, yes, where opposition parties attract a certain degree of media attention. If we look at the Nkandla report, that Parliament adopted last week, much to the chagrin of the opposition parties. They were saying that how can you entrust the composition of such a report to a minister who is appointed by the president? Unlike judges who cannot be just removed on a whim, but the minister can be removed without giving any reasons. They're saying, come on people, this is a farce. And now they're going to court to show that this was not constitutionally sound. So why is that wrong?
Well, you know, it is the tendency to personalize institutions because if you look at the Department of Police, it is a constitutional structure of the executive. So you cannot just reduce it to a person who is heading it in the form of a minister. You must treat it as an institution that is recognized in the Constitution. And that's what the president, in his wisdom, the executive, said that the person who can be able to implement these particular recommendations of the ad hoc committee of last year is the minister. By the way, even the reference in the public protects report that talks about the treasury as well as the subs, those are the people that are appointed by the president as well. So there is no difference really, but we must be careful that we do not personalize the institution to an extent that we are undermining the very constitution that we purport to respect.
Moloto, in recent months, a number of senior ANC officials have voiced concerns, like yours, about the role of the courts. Secretary General Mantashe said to Carte Blanche, there's a trend here, a worrisome trend, a drive in some sections of the judiciary to create chaos for governance. It's worrisome. The judiciary is becoming political. One arm of government has authority over another. Do you think that there's a widening rift here between the executive and the judiciary?
Well, you know, there are three arms of the state that have to operate cooperatively. Well, of course, there will be some instances where there is a contestation of power. I think that should be expected in a democratic setup as ours. But I do not believe that there is a reason to believe that there is some kind of tension or hostility between the executive or between parliament and the judiciary. Remember, politicians, in terms of the freedom of speech, are supposed to be critical to politics, to be critical, to comment on the decisions of the judiciary, but that does not mean that there is some kind of hostility. I can give you an example of what happened in the United States following the adoption of the same-sex legislation. I mean, there were some politicians from the Democratic Party that said such worse things about the judiciary. You know, to an extent that they said that is tantamount to a coup d'etat or some sort of. That is really supposed to happen in a democratic setup where people should be able to reflect on the decisions of the judiciary.
But do you think that there's appreciation in the executive, but you're from Parliament, so in Parliament especially, for the fact that separation of powers doesn't simply mean that all three legs of government should just leave each other alone? Indeed, this is a constitutional democracy, and the highest authority in the land is not even the executive or Parliament. It is actually the Constitution. I mean, do you not think that there's a misunderstanding among some members of Parliament, at least, about how this actually works? It's not as if the courts cannot say something about the legality of how the other legs operate. It's their duty.
Well, I don't think that there is some kind of a misunderstanding. Remember, the decisions that are taken anyway, they are bound to cause debate. They are bound to make people to reflect in one way or another. For instance, the report of the public protector, it's a point of debate in the country. The report of Marikana, there are opposition parties that are accusing the judge of certain agendas. You have got so many other reports and decisions of the judiciary that gets debated. But I don't think that that should mean that those who are doing so do not understand the role of the judiciary within a democratic system. In fact, they do. Parliament, we make rules that governs the business of Parliament. Sometimes they get contested in court, as we have seen in the past. Also, there is pieces of legislation that get adopted all the time. And, you know, sometimes they get overturned by the Constitutional Court. But that is part of how the Constitution is supposed to guide the rest of us in the country. One
of these opposition parties that you're referring to is obviously the EFF, who didn't like what they heard in the Farnham Commission's report about Marikana. Now, what is the role being...
And their lawyer as well.
And their lawyer as well. The role of the EFF in Parliament, many of the opposition parties have now, with the ANC, turned against the EFF when it comes to the adoption of parliamentary rules, because they say, listen, these guys are really making it impossible for Parliament to conduct its business. What is your strategy in the ANC to actually still communicate with people despite what the EFF is trying to do there? In other words, they're trying to shut you up all the time.
Well, you know, the supremacy of the rules that governs the business of Parliament must be respected. And I think for the past few weeks we have seen how that has been entrenched to an extent that all political parties in Parliament are saying that we need to respect the rules. We need to ensure that all of us are given equal time to pronounce ourselves, to represent, and to take forth, put forward the views of our constituencies. So we are beginning really to see a situation whereby Parliament is becoming stable again and beginning to do what it's supposed to do. And that's what really is needed.
Do you think are they making it impossible for you to do your job?
Not necessarily. I mean, they are just an irritation, of course, but over and above that, really, we don't believe that they are such a stumbling block. They can be dealt with through the rules. And as we have seen, all political parties are saying enough is enough. We are tired of you trying to prevent all of us from doing our job. It's not only about the ANC. It's all political parties saying that we need fair chance to represent our constituencies and to put forward their aspirations and views. And that is what really is beginning to happen. Whoever is going to try to disrupt the business of Parliament, they are going to be dealt with through the rules that have been toughened.
I almost had to disrupt you there. Thank you very much for coming on to Insig, Moloto.
Thank you.
Dit was Moloto Mothapo van die ANC. So kom ons aan die einde van vanaand se regstreekse uitsending van Insig. Sien julle volgende week weer. Goeienaand.